What it do, y'all? It's your girl Makeup and Travel, and for today's video your girl is here to bring you a video with the last video in my series of collection. I believe I've hit all the necessary categories for 2019, and this is going to be my eyeshadow palette collection. I am recording this on Friday when it will be going up, so just keep that in mind because it will probably be going up late. I still have some other things I need to get done today, but it will be going up today. I did record this look. I used my this is not Juvia's, no, I used my Blush Tribe Hazina 2 palette, and yeah, it'll be going up when, the world will never know, but I always do my best to link it below when it does go up. And yeah, that's it. I just wanted to bring you guys an intro for my eyeshadow palette collection. Okay, I'm getting weird. Let's get to it. Alright guys, so I just zoomed out so you guys can see the full mammoth that is my eyeshadow palette collection. I have a variety of palettes from a variety of different places. I am just going to zoom in so you guys can focus on one little area, and then yeah, I'll show you guys my full collection. Alrighty guys, so I'm gonna go ahead and start off with these really small palettes. As I've stated multiple times at the end of 2019, I don't really reach for these. So do I need them? No. Do I use them? On occasion, mainly when I'm traveling or for my eyeshadow palettes that I like to use at work. So that's the only reason why I have them. Let's keep going. The first palette right here is called the Sassy Sienna's palette. And as you can see, I have changed it so it does not look exactly the same. I took my autofocus off. I hope you guys don't mind. It just always makes too much noise, but I like the quality of the video, so yeah. Anyways, I changed the packaging. I didn't like just the normal shades in there, so I added a white in case I wanted to set my primer, and I added a black to make these all a lot deeper. On my complexion, these shades are not as deep as they may be on other people, so that's why I did that. In that same range, I also have the Marvelous Moms palette, which once again I did a very similar thing. I decided to add an actual white because this is an off-white with a yellow purple undertone, and then I added a warmer purple to add to these more cool tone purples. So kudos for that. I actually have 3 of these Smashbox palettes, but the third one, I don't know where it is and I don't feel like hunting for it. This one is the Ultraviolet eyeshadow palette. I really do enjoy this palette. I don't always get my full look from this palette, but it is a very good palette nonetheless, and so I enjoy using it. The other one that I have here is the Prism eyeshadow palette, and this one is really pretty, mainly for the shimmers. As you can see, there's pretty much only shimmers in this palette, so that's what I reach for if I want this. And I will actually use these 2 palettes, the 2 Smashbox palettes, in conjunction with each other. Next I have my NARS palette, and this one is called Scandal. This is a very pretty palette. I love this palette. I got this for a holiday, I want to say a couple of years ago, and I very much enjoy it very much because it's pretty, you know. My only mini Natasha Denona, and this is her mini Lila, I want to say. Yeah. And yeah, I don't really have much to say. It's a nice palette. I'm not crazy about it, but it's nice. Then I have 2 e.l.f. palettes that I still don't want to get rid of. One is the Mad for Matte palette, which is very colorful, very nice. I enjoy this palette when I really want a drugstore palette, but I also enjoy traveling with this because I don't mind if this shatters or breaks. Other palettes I mind greatly. And then the other palette I have is the Holy Smokes palette. This is pretty much my only dark smoky palette in my collection now. I have already gotten rid of my Lorac Pro 2, so this is my smoky palette for my collection, which I'm not mad about. It's just the fact. So yeah. Next, I have my Linda Hallberg Enchanted Secrets palette. This is an all shimmer palette, all topper palette. I do enjoy this palette. I know some people don't like it, but for me it works. So, I mean, I'm not about to hate on it. I enjoy it. Next, I have the Viseart Liaison palette. This has a weird packaging. I'm not the biggest fan of this packaging, but the colors create such beautiful looks on my eyes and my complexion that I really do enjoy it. And you guys will see purple is one of those colors that I have an obscene amount of, which is why towards the end of 2019 I actually stopped buying palettes that were purple because I just have so many. This is one of, oh, I have another Kristen Lee palette. I will reach over and get it. This one, I can't remember what the name of this palette was, but this was one of her first palettes, if not her first palette. I've been purchasing from her brand for a very long time. And yeah, I have an obscene amount of shades from her, but this was the palette that she first came out. Her most recent palette is this one right here. It's called the Autumn Vibes palette. And as you can see, the packaging has greatly increased, but also the formula of the eyeshadows are still the same, which is what I care about. I have used 3 out of the shades. I've used Oh My Gourd, Feeling Pine, and Falling, what is that, Leaves? Yeah. So the only one I haven't used is the red, which isn't surprising. I don't tend to use a lot of metallic reds. But still, very good palette, and overall same formula. The other mini quad that I have is a matte quad. This is one of their Patrick Star collaborations, and this one is Gold Getter. I had no business buying this. I just wanted it to collect it, and so it's gonna sit here for a little while. I will reach for this palette more often because these neutrals are actually purpled, so that'll be nice. But this gold bronze, I don't like golds, so yeah. This isn't really a palette, but I had no other place to put it. This is actually a pigment and 2 eyeshadows on the top from Hank and Henry. I love this situation. It's a really good formula. These are really good formulas. If you did not know, the pigment is messy as always, but it's actually a really good formula. And this one is in AKA Lady Money, I think. So very nice. And then the last 3 palettes I have in here from the same brand, and it's Igneous Cosmetics. Last time I checked, she was attempting to come back, and she actually reached out to me, but she never, to my knowledge, she hasn't really dropped anything at all in 2018. Or 19. I remember this brand from 2018, and this particular palette is called Cozy Cabin, and this is purple tones and neutrals. The second one that I have is Deep Blue, and this one really is some really nice purple tones, green tone, and then some blue tones as well. The last palette that I have from her is Lakeside. And it's a little busted, but that's because I tend to drop everything. And this is green and blue. So all 3 of these palettes are beautiful. I will say the shimmer formula isn't the same in all of the palettes, but overall it's not bad. I'm just going to go ahead and pack this organizer back up, put it back in my collection, and then we can go on to the real palettes that I really care about. Just because they look lonely over there, let's just go ahead and do Mother Pat's palettes first. I am going to focus on trying to get these done by brand because that's how I organize stuff, and that's just, it makes sense to me to do it in that manner. So the first palette that I have on top of my Pat McGrath palettes is this baby right here. And she is the Mothership Sublime Dark Star palette, and this was a holiday palette. I don't know if it ever released permanently, and this, as you can see, has some cooler tones with that random weird gold that Pat thinks deserves to be into every palette, and I, like the genius I am, continue to buy even though I don't really wear gold. Go figure. Next I have the La Vie in Rose, which is the miniature version of her Subliminal palette, and I love purple and pink so much that I went ahead and scooped this up. Once again, there goes that stupid gold. I will say some of these mattes were actually really dry, so this was not and is not my favorite palette from Auntie Pat. And then my last Pat McGrath palette is actually a Big Daddy palette, and this is the Mothership 3 Subversive, which is the big version of the La Vie in Rose that I just showed you guys. I love, if I can get this together, I love this palette, okay? It is spectacular and beautiful. You get your neutrals, and then you get really nice fun shades. These 4 in the corner are of course the favorites of this whole palette, but I enjoy this palette completely. I do want to get more use out of all of my Pat McGrath palettes, so I am going to try and focus on them at some point this year so that I can actually get some wear out of them, because right now it doesn't even look like I've really used them much. I'm just going to get this out of the way because I'm pretty sure this is actually my only Urban Decay palette in my collection. And this was actually something that I won in a giveaway from Georgia Harris Yo. And this is my Electric palette. I keep this palette because I think it's fun and pretty. And I like that it's pressed pigments. So I don't get much use out of it, but I do want to keep it in my collection. I feel as though I will start to get more use out of something like this now as the year continues on. Okay, let me see if I can find all of my Menagerie Cosmetic palettes. I think I have, don't I have 5? Okay, I can't find one and I can't think of another one that I'm missing. So we're going to go with this pile right here. The first one that I have on top is the Whale Song palette. This palette is a beauty, okay? It is both greens and blues with some like greeny neutrals. I enjoy this palette immensely, and I did a 3 Lux 1 palette with this. If I can, I will try and I will just link down below my playlist for the 3 Lux 1 palettes for you guys, because it'll be just way too many videos, which is always a good thing. Next I have my Dragon Child palette. I got this before they switched to Makeup Menagerie. I had this one, it says Makeup Monsters, and this is a weird color scheme, but one that I was extremely attracted to, and I love this formula. This is the formula that I wish they can get back to. I really enjoy it. I think this is going to be one of the first palettes that I do a 3 Lux with, because if I can remember correctly, I have not done one yet, and I am still inspired by this palette. The Pharaoh palette. This was a palette that I didn't really want originally, and then they changed 2 out of the top shades. They changed these 2 shades. They changed these 2 shades right here and kept these 2 neutrals, and I felt like that's enough neutral but enough color that I am down for the count. So I went ahead and scooped it up. It's definitely not my favorite color scheme overall, but Menagerie Cosmetics is one of those brands that I would like to collect all the palettes if I can, and if I enjoy them. So yeah. The last palette I believe I have from them is the Violet Ink palette. This is a palette that I got a lot of weird juju from. I love the colors, I love the looks that I created, but I did not like the formula. I.e., you see this shade right here, it's all crumbled and busted. That's because it's such a dry formula that I had to dig, and then I chunked out some of the eyeshadow. So I never recommend this palette, but I say if you hear my critiques and you still want to try it, go ahead. You won't get bad looks, but it's just the formula is just not the same at all. Okay, another one palette wonder here is Huda Beauty. This is her new nude palette. This is the only palette from her that has stayed in my collection. I've had two others and I didn't like either of them when I really got to use them. And this one I really do enjoy. So this one is going to stay in my collection, and I'm going to keep getting use out of it. Next, let's talk about my Too Faced collection. I don't have as big of a collection as everybody else, but here it is. The first one is the chocolate gold palette. This was my first palette from them, I want to say, and I really enjoy it. I was aiming to hit pan in this baby right here, and I was actually pretty close, but I ended up not meeting the goal, and I just kind of stopped. Plus, I stopped setting my primer. But I still do get the chocolate scent, or I can smell it literally from where I'm sitting, and I'm sitting quite a distance away from the camera's angle. And I really do enjoy the shimmers in this palette. That's why it's been able to stay in my collection. And then the other palette was actually a gift, so this will never leave my collection. This was a gift from my best friend for Christmas one year, and this is the Gingerbread Spice palette. I wanted this, but I couldn't bring myself to buy a neutral palette, so I actually asked her to buy it for me, and she did, and I'm very happy about it. So happy. I love this palette. I do reach for it from time to time and create beautiful looks. So yeah. It only feels right that I go ahead and get my Juvia's Place collection out of the way. This is not Juvia's. I have quite a few from her. I cannot recall actually purchasing one in 2019. I believe all of these were purchased in 2018 and 2017. So let's get at it. The first one is the Zulu palette. Oh my gosh, my camera. The first one is the Zulu palette. This Zulu palette is beautiful and stunning. Very pretty colors. As you can see, I've gotten a decent amount of wear from this palette. I would like to get more wear, of course, but I do really enjoy Juvia's formula. And they're such big pans, it's hard to pan one of them. Next one is the Afrique palette by Juvia's. Next one is the Afrique palette by Juvia's, and this palette is not one of my favorites at all from this brand, but I do keep it because a couple of the shades are unique to my collection, and yeah, that's honestly why I do not love a lot of these shades. Like these pops of color are just, these pops of color are just not my favorite at all. The Saharan by Juvia's is a really nice neutral palette, actually. I love that it brings some uniqueness to it and brings some actual color in a unique way, like I said. So I do enjoy this palette. I don't get much use out of it, but I do enjoy it. The Douce, or Douce by Juvia's. This is their pastel palette. I really do enjoy it. In past, I thought I liked it more. The one thing I will say is that it doesn't translate on my eyes the best. So I do want to work on that with this palette, because if it doesn't transfer on my eyes, I can give it to my best friend. She's a lighter complexion and she can get more use out of the colors because they actually show up on her complexion. The Tribe palette by Juvia's is another palette that I must have got this 2019. This had to have been a 2019 purchase, I'm pretty sure. But this is a beautiful palette, very pretty palette. I love it. And yeah, it's a very pretty palette. Next is the Nubian 2 by Juvia's. This was my very first palette that I picked up from Juvia's. This was back when I only had a blog, which is funny. But yeah, I really enjoy this palette, and this brings back memories. That's the main reason why this is still in my collection, because this is very much a neutral palette, although there are some unique and interesting shades in this that make it not so neutral. Then we have my two bigger palettes. The first one is the Magic by Juvia's, and this is a big palette. You get both warm tones and cool tones in the same palette, which I do enjoy. It actually brings some uniqueness and you can do some variety. These shimmers are really pretty because they're dual chromes, and yeah. And then my last Juvia's Place palette is my Masquerade palette. This is another very pretty palette, half neutral, half colorful. I don't get much use out of the neutral side. I actually started to use some of these down here as bronzers, funny enough, and highlighters and stuff. But yeah, not bad at all. So that is my Juvia's Place collection. This is getting harder to just focus on the brand, so I'm just going to start pushing the piles in the center and we're just going to kind of go from there. The one on top right here is my Foiled Rose palette from Love Luxe Beauty. This is a palette that I will cherish. I love this palette. As you can see, this palette is busted, okay? I got a lot of use out of this palette and the shades are very, very pretty. The looks that I created with this palette were sensational. I will definitely keep this palette, and if nothing, these metallics are insane. This is another palette that I want to get a lot more use out of in 2020, and this is my Dark Mattes palette from Viseart. I love this color scheme. I love this palette. I actually got it from a third party, and I want to just get my money out of it at this point, especially like this mustardy shades and these green tones. I love tones like this, so I just want to use this as kind of like an everyday palette, as some other people use like the basic neutral palette. Next is one of the biggest palettes that still are in my collection, and this is my Candylicious palette from Bombshell Cosmetics. This is the only palette from this brand that has stayed in my collection. I had, I believe, 2 other small ones. I did not like the formula. I really enjoy not only the formula, but the color scheme of this. As you can see, I actually hit Pan and Minty, and I really love the shade right next to it, which is Money. I really just loved this color scheme and the looks that I was able to create. I actually created a 3 looks 1 palette. I'm pretty sure this was one of my very first out of all of them on my channel. 2 palettes that I actually got from a brand that sells on Amazon, but I believe they have their own site. This one was actually sent to me for free, and this is Delanchi, and this is like their rainbow palette or whatever have you. This is an okay palette. It's not the best. It's actually a pretty thin formula, but why I keep this in my collection is for the instance that I need a colorful palette for Christmas, not Christmas, for makeup looks like face paint and stuff. So that's why I keep this in my collection, because I don't want to ruin other palettes that I prefer the formula for my actual eyeshadow. Because I mean, it's not a bad palette, but it's just not, the thickness of the actual shadows is not as there as my other palettes. And then this one I actually really do enjoy. This is their Nocturne palette. I enjoy the shades over here, the circled shades. The squared shades I don't touch, they just sit there, but the circle shades are really nice, and I actually kept this one and got rid of my Jaclyn Hill palette because my friend wanted that and I didn't really care about the label. I just liked the color scheme, and this has some of those colors, so, and the actual colors are better as well in this palette than that palette, so I'm happy about that. Where is my other palette so I can at least, I don't know where my other one is. It'll show up eventually. This is my first palette that I got from Lunar Beauty, and this is the Strawberry Dream. I loved this packaging, so I fell into the void, and I also got it for a discount. This is actually a really nice palette. The thing that I don't necessarily like about this palette are these 2 blues. They don't actually work in your crease. They only work on your on your lower lash line really, which, like I said in the review, I understand because that's mainly how the brand owner would use them. So definitely love this palette. I would definitely recommend it, and I did do a 3 looks 1 palette and review on it in case you are interested. Nomad Cosmetics. We're just gonna go ahead and lump you right there. This one is the Lago di Como palette. This is my most recent purchase from them. I love this palette. A 9-pan palette where you get blues and greens and some neutrals. Very, very pretty. Highly recommend this palette and this brand. The formula is sensational. The first palette that I got from them was their Harajuku palette. And this palette is really known because of this row right here. This row is insane. It's like a foiled metallic, but it also has glitter in it. This row is satins and this row is mattes. Overall, I love this palette. I did another 3 Lux 1 palette with this one. I really loved this 3 Lux 1 palette because it was so unique. I was able to create like a gray and black toned look. When in the dickens do I ever do a look like that? Never. So it was really nice. And yeah, this is a really good black, by the way, in case you were wondering. Very good black. And the gray almost turns into a black when you blend it out. But yeah, really good. Dose of Colors, I believe this is my only full palette from them, and this is their Friendcation palette. It's a collaboration with Desi and Katie. Very neutral toned palette with some pops, as you can see. But it is an enjoyable palette. I do enjoy it. I very much love the metallics, and I got this for like half off, so duh. My only real Natasha Denona palette is this one, and this is the Blue Purple palette. I love this palette. As you guys know, blues and purples are some of my favorite shades to put on my eyes. The only thing that I don't like about this palette is there's too many shimmers. I wish there were more mattes for me to build a little bit more of a complex crease, but overall I do enjoy it, and some of these metallics are just insane. This one right here, insane. This one right here, insane. Like, there are just certain metallics in here that are just more foiled than the others, which I probably could read the little label and understand why, but you know, that's too much like right, too much. We're gonna start off my ABH collection with this one, and hopefully I'll find the other ones in a stack over there. But this one is my ABH Norvina collection volume 3. I love this palette. I got so many decent looks out of this baby, and there's still so many looks I can get out of it. I think I did a 10 looks 1 palette with this, and that's insane. That was the first time I ever did that many looks with a palette, and yeah, I'm really happy I got this palette. I actually got this for the VIB sale, and very much worth the money for me. So my other three Anastasia palettes are right here. The first one is my Modern Renaissance. It's starting to look busted. I'm very proud of that fact. And this is what it looks like. This was in a Pan That palette for 2019. I got a lot of use out of this palette, even though it may not appear as easily panned as other people. For me, I don't aim to really completely pan the palette when I do a Pan That palette. It's more of understanding the palette and getting my use out of it. I understand how to use this palette a lot more for me, and I've gotten a lot of use out of it. So I'm very happy about this product, and it will be staying in my collection, which was not something I thought I would be saying at the end of 2019, beginning of 2020. This is my Prism palette. This was a holiday palette a couple of years ago. A lot of people didn't like it because they couldn't understand the color scheme. To me, the color scheme is beautiful. I love unique color schemes, so it was right up my alley. And yeah, pretty. I want to get some more use out of this palette, but right now I'm just happy to have it in my collection. Last ABH palette I have is the Subculture. This is the one pre-reformulation. So yes, I have the very, very pigmented, quote-unquote, unblendable version. I think it's blendable. You just have to take your time and be patient, which I don't mind. Some of my favorite shades actually have dents in them. As you can see, Access Edgy, what is this? Edge, Teammate, and Fudge. Those are kind of my favorites. Out of all of my ABH palettes, this is my favorite. I love the dark tones in here, and they're just really, really pretty. So nice things here. I believe I have, yep, 2 palettes from this brand. So this is Makeup Addiction Cosmetics. This was one of their older palettes that intrigued me, and this is called the Meadow palette. You get 4 mattes and 4 shimmers. I actually really do enjoy this palette. I think I did something with this palette on my channel. I don't remember what it was, but I do enjoy this palette and I get a decent amount of use out of it. Not the most, not the least. Then my other palette from this brand is the Sinful Eyes. I know I did a 3 looks 1 palette with this. Not very many people talked about this palette on YouTube. I enjoy it. And you also get a variety of different textures, which is interesting. And it's a little bit of depth and darkness that I really enjoy in my palettes. So I am happy to have this in my collection, even though very few people are talking about this brand right now, which is sad because the formula I found is actually really, really good. This is my only palette from Silver Beauty and I enjoy it immensely. This is the Block Party. I did a look, maybe 3, who knows, but I love this. My favorite shade in this palette is actually Nachos, and that's not coincidental because I do love nachos. And yeah, very, very pretty palette. The Blue Moon palette from ColourPop is one of my only ColourPop palettes right now, and I love this palette. Out of the 2 9-pan monochromatic palettes that I have, I absolutely love this one. I was able to create so many different blue looks, and this one shade right here, Daba D, is my favorite out of all the 9 shades because it's the most unique to my collection. Let me see if I can find my other palette. Yep, here it is. My other ColourPop palette, which is a 9-pan as well, is the Honey palette. And this is the all yellow palette. I changed it. As you can see, I actually put a brown in where the glitter was. I know I wasn't going to reach for the glitter. I know I would actually use a dark brown. So I took it from another ColourPop palette and I popped it in here. So now this is more usable, friendly for me because this Buzzkill shade is not dark at all. It's like a mustard, a dark mustard, more of a camel. That's it. So this is the shade that really gives me something. So yeah, these are my 2 palettes from ColourPop. Crazy, isn't it? I think this is my only real palette that I've kept from Kat Von D. All the other ones I either have already depotted or intend to depot. And this is her, what anniversary was this? 10th anniversary palette. And I'm not gonna lie, I still think that this palette is very pretty. I didn't get much use out of it because right after I purchased this, I'm pretty sure the debacle happened. And I was like, oh, great. Joy. But I do still enjoy this palette, so that's why it's in my collection, but I don't get much use out of it. So yeah, we'll see how long that lasts, because I don't want things just sitting in my collection. I want to actually get use out of them. I have 2 palettes from Cleonid Cosmetics, and this first one is the Paleo palette. This was the first palette they came out with. This palette is gorgeous. Both the pigmentation, the blendability, and the formula, the color scheme, all of it, all around is beautiful. I love this palette. The Archeo palette, on the other hand, I wasn't a huge fan of. One of my shades came busted, so I tried to press it in and the formula was just never the same. It basically completely dried out. The other mattes are okay, they're not the best, and the shimmers once again are okay, not the best. So for me, this was definitely their downfall, which sucks because Archeo really screams to me a lot more than anybody really knows here. And yeah, either way, I'm gonna keep them because I really enjoy them, but yeah, the Archeo one could have been a lot better. This is my only certified palette in my collection, and that is because I don't like their shimmers. I got this palette because I wanted to try both their shimmers and their mattes. Their mattes are beautiful, very, very pretty, but it's also not a extremely unique formula that I feel the need to purchase a lot of palettes from them. The mattes or the shimmers are trash. It's honestly trash. At the most, I can get use out of it putting in my inner corner, but I refuse to put these shimmers on my lid. They're quite literally shimmers. They're not metallics, which is why I don't like them. And then my very first 3 looks 1 palette was with this. This is the LA Color Classic Horror palette. I actually didn't hear about them coming out with a Halloween palette this past year. I would have picked it up. Anyways, this is the palette. I love this palette. This was my first 3 looks one palette. I got so many interesting looks. The Psycho shade is like a mustardy mac and cheese shade. I just very much enjoy this palette, and this palette is going absolutely nowhere. Okay, I'm just gonna pull piles at random now. I should only have 2 piles left, but you never know. This is my one and only Michelou palette. This is their Witchcraft palette. I got this because so many people were raving about this, saying that it was such a great quality. I found that a lot of the shades were not the best. I got hard panned in a bunch of these shades, and some of the shades didn't even work for me. So I actually put in some singles from Igneous Cosmetics that I know work on my complexion and I know would work with this color scheme, and kept some of the good shades from them. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are actually shades that I popped in. The other ones aren't. And if I remember correctly, this is actually a magnetic palette, so that's why I was able to do it. But otherwise, I really wouldn't have gotten much use out of this, because a lot of the shades just had, like, especially the mattes, had a lot of hard pan, and I couldn't understand how mine did and nobody else's did. But either way, I love the packaging. The packaging is goals, but just the formula, they need to get the formula better. Of course, I have my Blush Tribe and Paulina palette. This is a beauty, of course. This was and is my favorite Blush Tribe palette. I love the color scheme. I love the formula. Just overall, a beautiful, beautiful palette. I apparently didn't put all of my Juvia's Place palettes together, because I have 2 in this stack, so we're just going to talk about them really quickly. This is the Festival palette by Juvia's. Very pretty palette. It is kind of a funky color scheme, but if you look at them in kind of trios, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, you can kind of create a look. It is kind of funky, but you know, Juvia's Place's owner loves to do that to you, so you just kind of get used to it after a while. The Saharan palette by Juvia's is another beautiful palette that I went ahead and I bought. I love this palette. I love that it has the 3 basic neutrals on the bottom, and then you get 6 shimmers to really create a variety of looks. Nomad is my favorite shade, as you guys will have saw in my Perfect Juvia's Place collection video, and I really do love this palette. I'm just going to jump back into Blush Tribe because I see it and I wanted to kind of keep them together. And this is the only other Blush Tribe palette that I've kept. Every other palette I've gotten rid of. And this is their Fall Fusion palette. I really enjoy this palette. Very pretty colors, very nice pigmentation and formula. The only shade I don't like is this one right here. This yellow is trash. It really is. It like ends up being like ashy and pastel on my complexion, and it just doesn't work. She could have just kept this, which is like a mustardy yellow, and done a different shade right here. So just food for thought. Okay, going back to my pile. This is my, I believe, only BH Cosmetics palette, and this is it's my Ray Ray palette. I enjoy this palette. I take this traveling with me, and this might actually be the palette that I take on my birthday trip, which is coming up, because I can do a variety of things. I have my highlighter, I have my under eye powder, I have my bronzer, I have my face powder, although I would probably have to mix these two, and then I also have some basic eyeshadows that will work. So yeah, this might actually be the palette that I take with me, so it can knock out a bunch of birds with one stone. Next, I'm going to talk about Revolution Pro. I went and splurged on this brand, or this aspect of this brand, and I actually really do enjoy this palette. This reminds me of kind of a cross between the Viseart Dark Mattes and the Viseart Bright Mattes palettes. So that's why I've never purchased the Bright Mattes, but I also really do, like I said, enjoy this formula, and I don't feel the need to get any more. So very nice rainbow palette for my collection. Then I have the Sophie X palette, which I do enjoy this palette as well. This definitely is a lot more brown tone, but for some reason I want to keep this as an actual palette, whereas some other of their Revolution palettes I wasn't a huge fan of. This one I just want to keep. So yeah, I thought I still had the Tammy palette. It might still be in this last pile, but I'm just not going to knock it over just to figure it out. Oh, I apparently have another Blush Tribe palette that I forgot about. Go figure. This is the Hazina 2. This was my favorite from the Hazina collection. And this is just a beauty. It's a purple, blue, green palette with one black, which is perfect for me because these are the shades that I reach for the most on my eyes. And I love a good black to create some depth. So really pretty palette. I might actually try and do a 3 looks with that one as well, because I don't think I've done that with any other Blush Tribe palette. Next is my one and only Nabla Cosmetics palette. This is their Dreamy palette, and it's okay. I think that it works better on somebody with a lighter complexion, but just with my complexion, I can get a variety of like 2 looks, which is disappointing, especially for the amount of shades that is in this palette. But the formula is good. Like I said, just the depth and diversity of the shades just is not great. Looking at their latest palette, I think that one might be a darker version. I think it's the Dreamy 2.0, is more for darker complexions, which I am happy to hear, but I can't buy their palettes. So yeah, I'm just gonna have to use that one. And then last in this pile is my X&O palette, and this is called the Berry Kisses Carla palette. This I loved. Very pretty palette. I loved the diversity in the mattes and then the diversity in the shimmers. I really enjoyed this palette when I was getting use out of it, and I hope to get more use out of it soon. Okay, we only have one pile left, and I have very little memory left on my memory card. So we're gonna make the little bit of memory left work to our advantage, and we are gonna get through the rest of these palettes. So on top is one of my favorites. This is the Beauty Wide Seasons eyeshadow palette. I think this was like my favorite for 2017. Excuse me. This is a Middle Eastern brand, and I really enjoy the formula, really do. The color scheme is interesting and unique. I still have yet to get their second palette. I really do want to get it. I just am never in the mood to get it. I don't know, it's weird. This is my favorite palette shade, as you can see, because it has a very nice dent in it. So yeah, I would recommend this palette. The only downside is that this brand is not really known, so you have to get it from their site. But I think they finally have PayPal on their site. When I purchased it, they didn't, so I had to like do a kind of weird shady version of PayPal, but it worked out. Oh, I do have the Tammy palette. Cool. This is the palette that I was looking for earlier. This is the Moonspell palette by Lunar Beauty. This is my favorite of the two. I'm not gonna lie, but I do enjoy both palettes. This palette is goals, okay? Goals. I love every shade in this palette, which means that his brand is improving leap years better than some other brands that I have tried. So I really, this will be the brand that when he comes out with something, I'll be nudging somebody that I know to buy it for me potentially, because I know he's going to be the brand that I'm going to want their products from immediately. This is the other Revolution palette that I have still in my collection, and this is the Tammy X palette. This was her first palette. I wish I would have waited and gotten her second palette, because that one's more my color scheme, but this does have a place in my collection. I don't have very many neutral palettes, so I get a good amount of use out of it, and these darker shades are more up my alley. So it's not bad, but it's just the color scheme isn't the best for me. Next I have my Colored Rain palettes. This one of course is my Queen of Hearts palette. Like many people, this was my first Colored Rain palette. I did drop this palette as always, but it actually came together and actually still works, which is very, very nice. I intend to get more use out of this year. This is a very similar color scheme to the Modern Ren, so I intend to kind of bang out that palette a little bit more and then break into this one to use in a very similar manner. So Hopefully I will be getting a good amount of use from that palette this year. This is their Vivid Pigments. I didn't get to this palette until after they created an actual palette. So this is what the palette looks like. I like all the shades. They're all really nice. I just wish I wouldn't have gotten it in a palette form and I could have gotten it in singles forms. Because singles, you can get a lot more variety of usage using singles, whereas a palette, it's a palette, so you would have to depot it. I don't want to go through those struggles. So yeah, this is actually a Z palette, but it's combining a bunch of my what's left of my 6-pan palettes from Colored Rain. So that's why it's actually in my palette collection. I think I'm gonna actually go ahead and just transfer it to my singles drawer because it's no longer in a palette format. But just for this video, I will show you, this is what's left of my 6 pans from Colored Rain. The other ones are actually in my singles collection already working as like something. So yeah, and I also have my Cheers to the Beauty palette depotted as well because I thought the color scheme for that one was a little too funky for me to keep as a palette. I think this is my only Lime Crime palette, and this is the Venus XL2 palette. I do enjoy this palette. I think I did a 3 looks 1 palette. I did that late 2019. I really enjoy this palette. This is very unique. Even the neutrals are actually more unique than you would think. So definitely a palette I intend to keep. Zuri Cosmetics. I love this palette. This is one of my top neutral palettes that I will reach for if I want a neutral palette. I just wish this brand came out with something more because the shades and the color arrangement was just impeccable. Then we have the Sephora Pro palette. This should be the Editorial 2.0. Yep, this is the only palette I have from them. There are certain shades in here that I enjoy, which is why I keep this palette. Overall, it's not the craziest palette, but like I love the Sense color. I love Owen. I love Blood Moon. Shades in here that are just really pretty, which is why I picked it up. I have learned to no longer pick things up just for a certain shade, but since I have it, I am going to keep it. One of my favorite picks from 2017, 2018 is this baby right here. This is the Slayer palette. I do enjoy this palette. It is so, so pretty. And I got such beautiful looks out of it. So I would highly recommend it in case you are interested. And the last palette that I have already in my collection is my Lick and Lash Playful palette. And this is perfect because this quite literally was my favorite palette of 2019 and 2018. And this is a beauty. I'm surprised I have not gotten pan in this, but I will be aiming to get pan in this palette because I've used this palette so much. You can see the huge dent in Mystic. There's a similar impression in Life of Lime. I love that shade as well. And just overall, I really enjoyed this palette. So I will be aiming to get a lot of use out of some of these palettes, more than others, of course, but that's just because there are certain shades that I love in certain palettes, and then just certain palettes in general that I enjoy overall. I will say that these are not all the palettes that I actually have in my possession, but some of the palettes I have not completely tested out, so they have not made it into my collection. And others, I don't know. I'm just shenanigans RS, okay? But because I'm recording this on Friday and this needs to go up on Friday, that's all I got for you folks. I wanted to put these in order based on what palette I like the most to what palette I like the least. I might still try and do that. Who knows? That could be another video down the line. But as of right now, this is what your girl got. So definitely comment down below if there's a particular palette that you would like me to do looks with. Right now, this is all I'm going to be doing looks with. I'm not getting PR, I'm not getting anything, so let me know down below what you want me to do some looks with. I'm aiming to get some pan in this one, but also do some more looks with my Ice Layer and some other beautiful beauties that I knew I had before. But you know, you look at these palettes and you're like, holy butterball, I want to do some more with you. So that's basically where I'm at. These are just a quick few that I pulled from the last couple that I was talking about that I want to get some more use out of. So we'll see how it goes. But I think that's all I have for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And as always, y'all, it has been real. Bye bye.